Video games are filled with tons of interesting places that we all get sucked into for one reason or another, sometimes because they send a chill up our spine. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 20 of the creepiest locations in video games of all time. Starting off with number 20, the department store from Condemned. Combining the modern horror obsession of liminal spaces and elements of urban exploration, Condemned is a game that feels ahead of its time in a lot of ways. And what I mostly mean by that is I don't understand why we haven't really seen a proper spiritual successor to it. There are a ton of creepy places to explore in this game, but the worst, at least for the purposes of this list, is Bart's department store. You come in here searching for a serial killer known as the Matchmaker, who has an unpleasant affinity for department store mannequins, which is bad news for you because this place is absolutely full of them. It's dank, it's dark, it's a little mundane, but it's creepy. It's that feeling you get when you're in an old mall or an abandoned shopping center, only it's pitch black and there's mutants that are crazed and want to kill you. Good old murderous mutants. You can rely on them. It's bad enough with the hobos, but the real terror starts when one of the mannequins just straight up walks off the display and goes for a weapon to attack you. Nothing supernatural going on here, of course. They're actually crazies who peeled off their skin and cover themselves in plaster to look like that. It's unsettling, to say the least, and their unique behavior makes them prioritize ambushes. They're always hiding around corners or hiding with other dummies to fool you. Makes for a supremely tense level that makes you so paranoid that when the actual supernatural stuff starts happening and the real mannequins start moving, you're more worried about running into these guys than the dummies that are moving on their own. At number 19, the Tower of Latria in Demon Souls. When it comes to horror, the first is often the best. When this game first came out, nobody really knew what to expect. Like, we didn't know just how dark and weird these things could get. We just thought it would be a slightly creepy action game, but little did we know, there was one level set in a Silent Hill otherworld. While every other location in the game follows some kind of logic, the Tower of Latria, just bizarre. It's an endless spiderweb of floating towers and narrow pathways suspended up in the air. The skyline looks like a vision of hell. It's pitch black and inexplicable. It's a location that makes no logical sense. Why is it just a bunch of spiral towers and bridges that don't seem to serve any function? It's weird, but that's not the most terrifying thing about this place. The real strangeness starts when you see this big old meat thing in the central tower. It's like a heart. It's beating, the sound reverberating from every other spot in the area. That's bad, but it gets worse when you get into an elevator ride. You go down to the ground floor, which is inexplicably a blood swamp. A swamp of blood, filled with pulsating veins and horrible human-faced bug monsters. It's such a grotesque alien environment, unlike anything else in the game. It's so unexpected and gross. It's legitimately unsettling. And there's a reason why this place is stuck in people's memories for so long. The remake version is scary, but the PS3 original is somehow worse. Like, the muddy textures and low fidelity make it an even more unpleasant and disorienting location. It's not actually as dangerous as it first appears. It's actually one of the few swamps in this series that doesn't poison you, but it's so unbelievably unpleasant, it makes me kind of sick thinking about it. And number 18 is the Dunwich building from Fallout 3. One of the most effective tools of horror is surprise. That's what makes this place so incredibly effective, just how unexpected it is. Fallout 3, it's a game that can be kind of creepy once in a while, but the Dunwich building is just a straight-up horror area, and it's not part of the main quest. You don't get any warning about it. It's just another building to explore that looks like any other. Suddenly, you start experiencing strange flashbacks out of nowhere. What? Didn't expect that, to say the least. Compared to a lot of other locations on this list, this place is fairly tame when it comes to scares, but it's so effective because it's totally unprecedented. You just don't expect anything about this unless you read about it ahead of time, which, shame on you. Experience it, fool. I'm joking, obviously, but the scary parts are a lot more memorable if you don't know about them. There aren't any new enemies, there's just ghouls, but the way this place uses them is very, very effective. The audio logs and notes you find paint a really unpleasant picture as well.
The raiders told spook stories about zombies in the ruins. Never saw anything like that where I come from. But Lord help me, they're real. Not quite what Thor said, but close.
And the final reveal of the strange alien statue being worshipped by ghouls is about as creepy as it gets in Fallout. At number 17, Ground Zero in The Last of Us Part 2. For a series with a lot of horror elements, you usually only have to get through single horror segments or small areas, basically anytime a clicker is around to get things a little more tense, but these things don't go on for too long. Take the Lake Hill Hospital from Part 2. Your first trip there, mostly just an action segment. You only get a small taste of the real danger of this place at the end when you fall into a lower level full of infected. Much later into the game, you revisit the hospital. And if you thought the experience would be the same the second time, you were in for a rude awakening. The return trip takes Abby through what is maybe the single most deadly place in the city. Ground Zero, the emergency room where all the earliest victims of the outbreak came. It's eerily quiet at first, seems strangely untouched, at least until you get to the security door and find a wall of disgusting flesh behind it.
Jesus.
It's the sort of over-the-top, disgusting thing you wouldn't expect to see in a series that normally takes itself so seriously, but things go full Resident Evil by the end, and you're ambushed by this gigantic amalgam monster that's far more intimidating than anything else you've seen in the entire series. The second half of the game gets a lot more experimental with the set pieces, and this is easily the most terrifying and unexpected of the whole series. And number 16 is Quake 4, the waste processing facility. The thing is that Quake 4 is not normally a scary game. It's basically if you took the mostly not scary Doom 3 and had the pacing of a Call of Duty campaign. Yeah, you're fighting these disgusting techno-zombie abominations called the Strogg, or Strega, no consistency in that pronunciation, so don't get on me about it. But you're doing it with a squad of buddies who have an oorah attitude and no fear. Then you get captured and the real horror starts. It's by far the most memorable part of the game, where you're strapped down on a conveyor belt, get slowly taken apart and Strogified, all in first person and in excruciating detail. The graphics, dated now, but this stuff still makes me wince. You eventually do escape, of course, and after getting through the medical facility, you wind up someplace even worse, the waste processing facility, a place where the bloody refuse of their conversion operation ends up. It's a bloody hellhole full of failed experiments who shuffle at you like zombies and beg for death.
These aren't zombies, they're partially Strogified Marines. This is some kind of dumping ground for botched transfers.
It's a disturbing and grotesque location that's not just the usual brand of gross for this game, it's legitimately creepy. At number 15 is The House from Visage. One of the more effective horror games in the last few years is Visage, highly inspired by PT, still manages to feel unique and disturbing in its own way at least. The house itself is an impressively creepy location. It's almost like an uncanny valley version of a house. There's all these details that feel real, but there's so much about it that doesn't make any sense. It's a winding, confusing hodgepodge of rooms that are both extremely mundane, but somehow still quite threatening. The looming threat of ghosts is also always there. The sanity meter constantly keeps you on your toes, and the obtuse puzzles and progression can be disorienting. It's a game designed to always keep you a little confused and distracted, but they let the actual horror come so slowly that when it finally does happen, it hits you like a sack of bricks. At least in the Dolores chapter, which is widely considered the creepiest part of the game, it takes a lot of time for the stalker to appear, but when she does, it sucks. And I mean that in a good horror way, not like the game sucks. And number 14 is Siren Blood Curse, the nest in the game. The Siren games they're scary in general, but if there's one game that's considered the low point in the series is the last one, Siren Blood Curse. It's sort of a remake of the first game, but streamlined, made for Western audiences, so a lot of the terror and strangeness of the original game's kind of just gone. When it hits, though, it hits real hard. Episode 7 feels like a climax in a way, with the main dude heading into the nest to stop the mysterious ritual. That's a central part of the story. The game was creepy before, but this place is absolutely relentless. There are murderous shibito around every friggin' corner. Many carrying rifles that are impossible to see without using the game's sight jack feature, and just reaching the nest is a challenge. When you actually get there, all bets are off. The place is a nightmarish jumble of houses built on top of each other, nearly pitch black, confusing, swarming with enemies, many of which are transformed versions of former playable characters and allies, making these monsters not just faceless beasts, but characters that we worked hard to try to save. It makes the whole thing more disturbing, and they're relentless about it. Everything about this place is designed to make you feel as stressed out as possible, and it works perfectly. And number 13 is The Evil Within, Ruvik's Mansion. This place is just cruel. The whole game, The Evil Within, it's set inside the mind of a madman, and it obviously throws a lot of creepy stuff at you. But to me, the scariest section of the game is in Chapter 9. This is where you go back to the main bad guy, Ruvik's memories, and explore the old mansion he used to live in. You might think the master is away, which lets you explore this place in peace, but of course they can't make it easy for you. Every once in a while, Ruvik himself will appear and start hunting you, and if he catches you, it's instant game over every time. There's nothing you can do about it but avoid him or run for your life. If it was all just scripted moments, it wouldn't be so bad, but he kind of shows up randomly, or at least semi-randomly, so if you're in a bad situation, he is going to catch you. That's not even the worst part about this level. This is also where you get to meet the manifestation of his sister who died in a fire, Laura. She's an even more deadly and terrifying enemy than her brother, able to move around quickly and once again kill you in a single hit. You can't catch a break in this game. And number 12 is The Dark Bramble from the Outer Wilds. In a game full of surprises, this is one of the biggest. I thought I was playing a puzzle game, and suddenly they're throwing this crap at you. One of the most distant celestial objects you can visit is the Dark Bramble, a strange little planetoid with a portal or something at the center. Enter inside of it, and you're transported to this strange white void full of brambles and something worse. Much worse. Much worse. When you first explore this place, you might be tempted to go towards the light, something that will lead you to a light seed, which transports you to a different part of the pocket dimension. But other times, well, actually most of the time, that light is coming from a gigantic anglerfish creature that can and will eat your whole ship whole. They're immediately drawn to engine sounds and noise of any kind, so the only way to get past them is to use the forward momentum to glide through the air without making any noise. Exploring this place is tense as hell because nobody wants to get eaten by a giant space fish in a horrible place that's confusing and hostile. It's not just a scary place or a puzzle game, it's just scary. And number 11, the Von Everett Estate from Witcher 3. A lot of creepy horror-themed quests in the game, but this one blows them all out of the water in scope, scale, and spooks. The 3 S's. It's one of the final missions of the Heart of Stone DLC, easily one of the most memorable locations in the entire game. So many memorable parts, from the reveal of the monster's caretaker at the start, to the talking cat and the dog, to the surreal painted world you enter. It's just one creepy thing after another in this place, and it goes on for a while. You can easily spend an hour in this single location. They're just constantly mixing stuff up. The flashbacks give an unsettling account of the master of the house's slow descent into madness and the tragic fate of his wife.
You will not command us. You will...
Father! Father! No!
It all culminates in a final battle against the nightmarish, ethereal, bloodbag-headed specter thing that's really unlike anything else in the game. It's just one thing after another here. It's the perfect haunted house and one of the best missions in the entire series. At number 10 is Woodside Apartments in Silent Hill 2. This list had to get to Silent Hill eventually, right? There's plenty to pick from in Silent Hill 2, but the Woodside Apartments stick out because of how early you reach them and how disturbing they are. These apartments, which appear both lived in and abandoned, have an eerily mundane quality about them that gives you some kind of creeped out feeling of being in like an empty hotel hallway at night. The endless rows of doors and slightly too narrow hallways make it a claustrophobic and unsettling place to explore. The many apartments aren't any better, with creepy environmental storytelling happening all the time. Of course, the real here is that this is the first place you encounter Pyramid Head, or as it's called in this game, the Red Pyramid theme, a hulking brute with a bizarre oversized metal apparatus on their head. There's the infamous mannequin scene, the first boss with the thing. It's all scary as hell, and it sets the horrific tone for the rest of the game. And number 9 is The Bunker from Amnesia, The Bunker. The Amnesia series may be one of the original innovators of the defenseless style of horror games, but with the 4th game in the series, they evolved the formula and took some important lessons from Alien Isolation. The choices make games scarier. In horror games, predictability is the enemy of fear. Once something becomes understandable and exploitable, all the fear is gone. Take any horror game where you're meant to run and hide. Whenever an enemy shows up, you only ever have 2 options, either running or hiding, which means you know exactly what to do at any given time. Alien Isolation smartly added complications to the formula, borrowing from other survival horror games, but keeping the deadliness of the enemy that's stalking you. Amnesia the Bunker takes those ideas and makes them their own, creating one of the most terrifying games in recent memory. A big part of the fear comes from the area itself. This World War I bunker is dark, secluded, and chaotically designed. It's a warren of narrow corridors and winding hallways built haphazardly. It's the perfect location to get stalked by a mysterious, unkillable monster. There's so many factors to keep in mind, from your crank-powered flashlight to your pistol ammo and grenades. There's a lot you'll need to be aware of. When the monster shows up, what do? Do you shoot it and hopefully it goes away? Do you run for a door, try to barricade yourself in? Do you toss a grenade and hope it hits anywhere near the monster? Or do you just do what happens to me most of the time and panic and die? And number 8 is the Ocean House Hotel from Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, another one of those unexpected horror missions. The name of the game is Vampire. Usually you're the one in control here. You're stalking around in the shadows, picking off terrified people one by one. But this location, you're the hunted one. It's one of the earlier missions in the game. Sounds pretty straightforward. You're supposed to investigate this old hotel. You might assume it's just like filled with drug addicts and low-level gangsters, but the actual mission is a lot spookier than that. The place is haunted, and the ghosts harass you constantly. It's not a long mission, but it's real memorable and has a real creepy backstory. And number 7 is Dead Space's mining deck. There's a lot of locations to pick from if you're talking about the creepiest parts of Dead Space. Some people think it's medical, others hydroponics, some people say the crew quarters, but if there's any one location that fills us with dread here at gameranx, it is the mining deck. This place is extremely dark, noisy, and confusing. There's traps everywhere, necromorphs can and will appear from unexpected places, the engineering team left traps everywhere, and they catch you by surprise. Oh yeah, and there's that meat kudzu covering the walls. This is the first place you really start to see that stuff's getting overrun with necromorph crap. In this game's case, I think the remake manages to make the place even scarier. The more detailed environments make for an even darker and more claustrophobic and cluttered place than the original, and some of the changes made to the story make the visual storytelling even more disturbing. And number 6, SWAT Force Children of the Tyrone Tenement. Another game that's not really a horror game. You think a game called SWAT 4 would be a dry police simulator, but keep in mind, it was made by the BioShock studio Irrational Games, and these guys were some of the best visual storytellers of their time. They managed to make a mission where you apprehend a single killer in his home, one of the creepiest missions ever, and this one tops it. Your goal here, like pretty much every mission in the game, is to go in, apprehend or disable any armed assailants, and restore order. It's easier said than done, though, especially in this confusing mess of a building. It's congesting and extremely confusing to navigate, with holes in the wall and dangerous sightlines all over. And keep in mind, only a shot or two is enough to kill you, and then it's game over. There are armored cultists who shoot on sight, but even the unarmed cultists are dangerous, often getting the attention of the gunmen and being extremely non-compliant when you try to arrest them. The whole place is uncomfortable and kind of sickening, but the biggest and creepiest surprise is hidden in the basement.
Threats. Keep it going. No one here. It's
Doc,
clear.
we found a graveyard in the basement. Looks
In
like
position.
it's their children.
Clear. Secure him. I'm on it, boss.
Copy that. Entry team notifying the morgue.
If you know, you know. I'm not going to say what happened here, but you can probably tell from the video. It's creeped me out just thinking about it. And number 5, Bloodborne's Research Hall. The base game is horrific enough, but the DLC really leans hard into the horror. It's the most demented location in the game. The unassuming sounding Research Hall is the second major area of the expansion, and a tower run by the Healing Church, created to, we can only assume, make contact with the Lovecraftian Great Ones that everyone is so obsessed with in this game. Whatever they're doing to people, it's nasty. Their bodies look skeletal and elongated. Their heads are ballooned into disgusting sacks of tumorous flesh. And what makes this place so unsettling is how unpredictable these patients are. Some of them attack you on sight, some of them leave you alone, some sit in the corner and mutter nonsense to themselves, others lay on gurneys and bemoan their fate. They feel less like the usual beasts for the slaughter and more like suffering victims in some kind of horrific experiment. One of the first you find is looking around in some water, muttering to themselves that they've lost their eyes. Some of them make bizarre sounds like water droplets, saying things like, "Will I ever curl up and become an egg?" Some of them don't have a body, they're just kind of a sack of flesh on the floor. It's grotesque and disturbing, especially because it seems like a lot of them kind of like what's happened to them, and I don't like that. At number 4 is Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl's Lab X-18. It's the Poltergeist lab. What else is it going to be? If you played Stalker, you absolutely know. You visit this lab fairly late in the game. There's a lot of build up to getting there, and the location does not disappoint. It is a truly creepy place. It feels more like an abandoned basement than a lab. Most of it's been picked clean, but that doesn't mean it's not full of anomalies that can kill you at any time, and swarms of dangerous mutants. By far the worst thing about the place is the poltergeists, though. Those invisible creatures that physically attack you with objects around the environment. There's not really a lot you can do to stop them. You just kind of have to move through this disorienting and confusing subterranean crap hole and hope for the best. Most of the time you're dying, either from random anomalies or from the poltergeists. It's an overwhelming and terrifying experience. Lab X-18 is easily the scariest one spot in all of Stalker. It's miserable. It's a grim place, somehow manages to be even more bleak than the rest of the game. And number 3 is the hallway in PT. Not a lot needs to be said about this one. It is, of course, iconic for a reason. It's a simple hallway that repeats endlessly, but somehow they were able to take what little they had and craft one of the most memorable horror experiences of all time. The hallway itself doesn't even really make any sense. Like, what kind of house is built this way? It's so mundane and unremarkable, but that's what makes it so frightening when things start to change. Feels like one of those nightmares where you're in your house and nothing feels quite right, and then things get worse from there. This thing manages to have one of the most terrifying stalkers ever, and basically, it's just another ghost, but it's just so well done. The demo went on to be a huge influence on a ton of horror games in the future, but the specific ways PT really is known for, it's still the best at it. If you were there when it came out and played it sight unseen, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Don't touch that dial now.
And number 2 is Brookhaven Hospital from Silent Hill 3. Silent Hill 2 is probably the best Silent Hill game, but Silent Hill 3 might be the scariest. This is the game where they took everything they learned from the first 2 and cranked the horror up to the next level. The locations are more realistic and unnerving. The other worlds you enter are probably the scariest Silent Hill ever got. Hospitals are already kind of creepy places to be in, so take one, slather a bunch of Silent Hill grime over it, and you got a truly disturbing place to be in. It's oppressive, confusing, full of strange monsters, and this one's got the infamous mirror room in it. It's a completely normal seeming room with a giant mirror on the side. The vision in the mirror slowly gets corrupted, only for it to start spreading into the real world, and if you're still in the room when that happens, you're screwed. The door is locked, and your only option is to die. It's one of the freakiest rooms in all of Silent Hill, and the area around it isn't a lot better. And finally, at number 1, the Shale Bridge Cradle from Thief 3 Deadly Shadows. The Thief series has always had minor horror elements, but this level, set in a double whammy of an orphanage with an old mental asylum, goes from 1 to 100 almost instantly. The moment you get up into the attic, things go absolutely nuts. The cradle, or the ghost that haunts it, wakes up and traps you inside, and the only way to escape is through an elaborate ritual, which, of course, forces you to explore every nook and cranny in the place. Normally, when you're in the dark in this game, you feel safe. But here, you are always vulnerable. Now there's these nightmarish creatures simply called puppets roaming the halls. They're former patients, wrapped in bandages, wearing a straitjacket, and they got weird metal cages over their heads. They look and move something straight out of Silent Hill, only somehow worse because they can't be killed. You can knock one out, but no matter what, they'll eventually get back up, usually right as you're walking past them to make it extra fun. The whole environment is extremely oppressive and grim. The notes paint a picture of abuse and cruelty to the patients and children. These monsters are just relentless. It's a nightmare from top to bottom.
good. The bottle is outside now, where the cradle can't see it. I have to get rid of all my things. The cradle uses them to remember me. That's how it keeps me here. There's a ward here called Whitehall, where they kept the very bad patients. One of them took my nightgown back to his cell. It's still there. Please get my nightgown and then burn it up in the morgue.
All this, and it happens in a thief game, which nobody expected at the time. And even going in exactly what it is, it's still a brilliantly paced and creative horror level. I do have a bonus for you here, Alien Isolation's Medical Bay. You can't have a list like this without at least mentioning Alien Isolation. There's a lot of terrifying locations, but to me, no other part of the game makes you feel as hunted and defenseless as this one. You get here fairly early in the game before you have any real tools for scaring off the alien, so when it appears, there's very little you can do other than distract it and hopefully avoid it. For most players, this is where you're going to die a lot. It's the first time the alien hunts you for real. It's not a scripted moment or a little section where the alien shows up. This time, it's a constant scary as hell presence. This is where the real Alien Isolation begins, and it's the most iconic part of the game. That's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on gameranx.